Hi, everybody. It's Kennedy Ryan, and I'm doing this on my computer. And so every once in a while, you hear these like bing, bing notifications. If you hear those, I'm so sorry. I'm not professional and have like cameras and things like that. So I'm doing this on my computer. So please excuse me if the notifications blare. But Audio Loves, it's good to be with you today. Heather, thank you so much for having me. Some of you may or may not know me, Kennedy Ryan, and I'm hoping that if you don't, that we can rectify that in the next few minutes with these amazing questions that Heather sent over to me. For those of you who do know me, I may have had more hair the last time you saw me. I don't know why. I woke up Monday morning and was like, who needs hair? And I texted my stylist and was like, can we cut my hair today? And we did. We cut it all off. This is not my first time doing what we call the big chop, where you just basically cut all your hair off. It's my second time doing it. And I'm still a little startled sometimes when I see myself because I'm kind of like, who's that chick? So if you see me look surprised at any point during this video, it's because I caught a glimpse of myself and forgot I cut all my hair off. Anyway, aside from my existential hair crisis, which isn't a crisis because I actually like it and my husband loves it, and I guess that's all that counts. If I love it and he loves it. But I'm going to answer these questions, and hopefully we'll get to know each other a little bit better through this. How did you become an author is the first question. I have always been writing. From a very young age, I was writing. I remember in the 5th grade, I published, and by published, I mean made copies of and distributed, circulated all around the neighborhood. My first book of poems, it was called Falling Phrases. It was green cardboard paper cover and pink construction paper interior for the pages, and it was called Falling Phrases. And I distinctly remember using the word ominous in one of the poems because my mother was like, you're in the 5th grade, what do you know about ominous? Anyway, I'm saying that to say my love for writing, it goes way back, stretches into my childhood. And when I was a senior in high school, there was an editorial column in our city newspaper, and for adults, so adults were basically submitting to write this column, and I don't know what made me think that I could do it, but I submitted, and I actually beat out all the other adults and was writing an editorial column every week for our city paper. And it was my first taste of writing professionally. And I had always known that I wanted to write, but it was my first affirmation that this is something that is a gift for you, and that people will pay attention because it's a gift, a talent, maybe, people will pay you for it maybe one day. I went to college and I got my degree in journalism, and I thought about writing fiction, but I knew that I wanted to do journalism. And then later on in life, just started toying around with fiction a little bit. My son had actually been diagnosed with autism, and it was a really hard time for our family. And then I started a foundation for families who have children with autism. This was like 11 years ago when I started the foundation, 14 years ago when he was diagnosed. And my whole life was autism. I needed an escape. Everything I read had to do with autism and stool samples and IV and biomedical treatments and, everything. My whole life was autism. And I hadn't been reading anything that I really enjoyed. And I started reading again, and then I realized that I really wanted to write again as an expression of my own creativity, but also as an escape. And I wrote my first book, which is When You Were Mine, and ended up submitting it to a publishing house. If you think indie versus trad, I started off traditionally published, and I'm also indie published. I'm what they call a hybrid. But my first book was a book deal with a New York publisher, and they optioned 4 books with me. So about roughly half of my books are traditionally published, and half of them are indie published by me, obviously. And so that's how I became an author, was just submitting that book, writing that book. And then as I started publishing, I was shocked that they wanted it. It's a very big publisher in New York. And I was really shocked that they wanted it on my first time out. And I didn't know very much about the business side of writing, and I learned that, and then realized that I really wanted to have a lot more control over my creative and intellectual property. And that's when I started indie publishing, and I first indie published a book called My Soul to Keep, which launched my Soul series. So that's kind of how I became an author. If you could have lunch with any author, alive or dead, who would it be? Gosh, there's so many. Probably Zora Neale Hurston. I'm a huge fan of Zora Neale Hurston as an anthropologist and as a writer and as an activist. She, as a woman of color in a very oppressive time in our history, managed to thrive as a creative, managed to produce work that was defiantly hopeful and that was so intellectually stimulating, that was so authentic. I love her. Their Eyes Were Watching God is like on my all-time favorite book list. And her as an activist, as a feminist, as a woman in a time that was male dominated, as a Black woman in a time when there was so much oppression, just watching her thrive as a creative has inspired me so much. And I would just pick her brain over a slice of pizza, probably, if that's what she wanted. Whatever you want, Zora. A question here: which influences your writing more, people or life events? I think a combination, but probably life events more. I write. If you've read my books, they are not rom-coms. Like, they are angsty usually, and they have a lot of real life issues at the center of them. Which is what I kind of thrive on. I write out of conviction. I know there are some people who write to trend, and that's awesome. Like, what's selling, what people are wanting, what's popular, I'll write that. That's not how I write. I write out of conviction, meaning, what am I passionate about at that time? What do I think needs to be said? Where are the voids? Meaning there are things that I think need to be said in whatever realm I'm in that aren't being said. And how do I want to say them? And then I think I started, sometimes that happens first. Sometimes the characters come first. Sometimes the issues come first. I write romance, and I love that, but it is not typical, in the sense that the romance is not all that there is to it ever. There's always issues. There are always real life struggles at the core. And you as a reader are challenged because the protagonists are going through these real life struggles. And it's not things like, should I kiss him or shouldn't I kiss him? They are things that deal with the evolution of them as a person. And in the midst of that, they are falling in love, or they are maintaining love, or they are figuring out love. But it is in the midst of usually some existential evolution, for them as individuals. And so, I don't know, a lot of real life events and current events make their way into my writing. And I love that, I love it. If you could take a writing vacation, where would it be and who would you take? Oh gosh, even though it's a writing vacation, I'd probably still take my husband. We've been married 20 years and he's my best friend, and he's really good about leaving me alone. Like, if I need to work, we are not these people who have to be like this all the time. We both work from home. And manage to kind of carve out our own space, which is great. But I would love that, because when I'm writing, he'll leave me alone. And then when I'm breaking, he'll want to be with me and I'll want to be with him, because there's nobody I'm closer to in the whole world, and no one who gets me better than he does. And we could be anywhere, where would you go? I know this sounds so sappy. Wherever we are together is great. Maybe Hawaii, because I haven't been to Hawaii, or New Zealand, because that's on my bucket list. But yeah, so, how and where do you find inspiration for your books? Everywhere. I think a lot of writers are people watchers. I can be watching, somebody in the park or wherever, and it kind of plants a seed and then that grows. I can see something on television and it sparks something. Or, for example, and this kind of goes back to the life events, people thing, what inspires your books. I am writing a sports romance pretty soon. And I told you my books are never typical. I mean, what people would call typical. So I say, oh, I'm writing a sports romance. And people are like, ooh, sports romance, fun. Of course, my sports romance is about domestic abuse. among professional athletes. So I saw the Ray Rice, if any of you have ever seen the footage of Ray Rice, the football player, when he knocked his then fiance unconscious in the elevator. I saw that and immediately was like, I'm going to write about this, and that's what I mean by writing out of conviction. It's not always that serious, but when something seizes me by my heart or something grabs my attention that way and I am indignant about it, because that's what I was when I saw the footage of him knocking his fiance out unconscious, and then the NFL being so slow to respond. I was indignant and I said, I'm writing a story about this crap, so I'm writing my sports romance, and at the core of it is domestic abuse, not the hero. He's not the abuser. So if that gives you a sense of kind of how I formulate things, and what I mean by writing out of conviction, so my stories tend to be, I wouldn't call them heavy, but they're not, they're struggle stories a lot of times, meaning the people are really struggling with something, they're grappling with something. And sometimes that's an external force, something that's societal, and sometimes that's something that's internal, but there's always a fight for that happily ever after. Do you research locations? I do some. I research everything, that is pertinent to my book. The book that I have coming out soon still, it has some really gritty matter in it, and I had to do a ton of research. And sometimes it's fun. Grip, if some of you are familiar with my book, Grip, he is a hip hop artist and he's a poet. And I can't even tell you, and I kind of modeled him loosely on, from a style perspective, Kendrick Lamar. When you look at somebody like Tupac, who attended School of the Arts. This character also attended a performing school of the arts. He was a poet. Tupac was a poet before he was a rapper. Like, there are all these parallels, and I watched so much footage of both of them. J. Cole, obviously, who is a more current artist, has his degree, and this made sure that he got his degree. I think he went to NYU. This character that I've written, Grip, goes to school online at NYU. He's brilliant. He's an activist. So I look out at things that are happening in the world that I need to dig into to get a better understanding of my fiction. And that's what I do. So yeah, I research locations. I research people. I watch a lot of interviews online. I interview people. For this last one that I just wrote, I interviewed a lot of nurses and doctors, and it just depends on the subject matter, but I'm always going to be thorough. And you have to remember that my background is journalism. So research is kind of how I'm made. And I definitely bring that into my fiction. Do you have writing rituals that you do before, after, or during? Yes. Biggest ritual is music. I also am a musician, not like major, but like I was in the concert and symphonic orchestra in high school, middle school, elementary school, literally for like 10 years, marching bands. Music was a huge part of my life. And then I was in singing groups, and then I I did some recording studios. So like, music is huge for me. And I know people say music is huge for me, but it's been such a huge influence in my life. It's something that I actually considered doing professionally as a singer, as a vocalist, and was kind of on that road a little bit, but decided I didn't want to. So all that to say, music is huge for me. I literally, for still the book that I just finished, that is the follow-up to Grip, which I released earlier in March, I had 40 songs on my playlist before I had written one word, and I think the playlist ended up being about 80 songs. The same for all my books. I really submerge myself in music before I start writing. Also, the Pinterest board, talking about researching locations, Pinterest is huge for me because I have no what's called spatial intelligence. Spatial intelligence basically deals with how you physically see the world and interpret information, and through visually. These are people who have high spatial intelligence, like my husband, are great with directions, have a real sense of things laid out for them. I don't have that. And so I literally, when I am writing about rooms in a house or a location, I will have to pin a picture of it to Pinterest so that I can see it. So those are just some things that I do. I always really invest a lot of time in my Pinterest board, in my Spotify playlist, and I really love Diet Coke. I drink a lot of Diet Coke when I'm writing. Other than that, and just writing late at night, I tend to write late at night. Oh, I do have a big ritual. I act out my dialogue. I know that's strange, but I will act out the dialogue that I'm writing, and I record it, like voice record it, and use that to kind of fuel what I put on the page. But it's hilarious because occasionally my husband has come in while I was doing that, and occasionally I've been weeping hysterically because I was acting out a scene, and my husband thought I was a little bit crazy. He still does, actually. What is a typical writing day? I don't think there's anything typical about my writing day. I don't write as much during the day as a lot of people do. I work more during the day. My foundation, I run an autism foundation. I work on that. And then I also do business for my, as an author. And then I probably focus more of my writing really early in the morning before people get up, and then really late at night when everyone goes to sleep. So that means I don't sleep very much. I don't. I probably sleep maybe a good night is 5 hours. Like 5 hours, it's almost like a coma. But I don't sleep very much. So I write a lot at night and really early in the morning. What music do I listen to for inspiration when I'm developing story? Everything. Like if you were to listen to my playlist now, it's so eclectic. I mean, it's everything from Imagine Dragons to Kendrick Lamar to Ariana Grande to Common to Talib Kweli. I mean, it's everywhere. And that's kind of how I am musically. It's kind of all over the place. So my playlists are too. It's going to be a real wide variety of things. Who is your favorite character? You can only pick one, and why? Well, gosh. I'm going to modify that, Heather. I hope that's okay. And say my favorite couple, because right now I have a favorite couple. I just finished writing Still, which of course is the follow-up to Grip. And right now, Grip and Bristol are my favorite couple, of course. Grip is... he's so authentic, and he is an activist, which is really, I think, different. In the space we're in, is that he's an activist, he's a poet, he's a writer, he's a hip hop artist, he's a performer, but he's also a very sensual guy, but very respectful. He's a mama's boy, and loves his mother and is very respectful of her, and she is the greatest influence in his life. Bristol is in contrast, not in contrast. Well, yeah, she is in contrast because her upbringing is completely different, but she has a steel in her, like this steely strength that is rare. And she has this huge capacity to love, even though she's really tough on the outside and very independent. And I love that. So I would say my favorite couple is Grip and Bristol. So unapologetically, unequivocally right now. Which was your most emotional book to write? This one. Still, the book that I just finished. I don't really cry a lot at my own books. I don't cry a lot when I read. I know some people talk about ugly cry, and it takes a lot to make me cry. And there were whole sections of this book that I literally just wept through. And people who have read Grip and are fans of Grip will not like hearing that. But trust me, I got you. But this was by far my most emotional book. And I won't go into why, because I don't want to spoil it for anybody. But I like for my characters to earn their happily ever afters. And this book, more than any book I've ever written, they do. They have to, they're tied. I mean, they are tried and they're tested. Because to me, just falling in love is really easy. Staying in love, and this is from someone who's been married for 20 years and been through a lot as a married person. It's the process of staying in love. It's often not even the tests that come from what you do to one another. It's just life. It's living in this world that's so sometimes dark and broken, and having this gorgeous thing that is love, finding a way to flourish in a world that is so often dark and broken. And seeing what kinds of strength that brings out and how it tries your love and makes it so much stronger. And so that's what this book is really about. And so I would have to say this book is my most emotional yet, by far. How do you choose your narrators for your books? I have Win and Kai did the Soul series books, and I love them so much. And that was my first time doing audiobooks. Was I have an audiobook for My Soul to Keep, and then for the sequel, which is Down to My Soul. And Win and Kai did those, and they did dual narration, which of course you guys know what dual narration is. But I loved that. I hadn't heard it very much at the time. This was 2 years ago, and not many people were doing dual narration at that point. Most people were still doing, you know, the guy on one chapter and the girl on another chapter. And it felt so natural to me, so conversational and so authentic. And I love that. And I chose them because they were one of the few audio couples, who were doing that at the time. And I loved their voices, and they were great for it. For Grip, it's not dual narration, it's duet. And for the first time I worked with a publisher, I worked with Tantor, which has been an interesting experience because I'm a control freak and you have a lot less control. But I chose a guy named J.D. Jackson for Grip. He did Amy Harmon's Law of Moses and Song of David, and his voice is like melted chocolate with caramel sauce. It is the most perfect voice for this character that I could even imagine. And so when my publisher was asking, who do you want? I said, this is Grip. I will only take him. And they were like, well, we can't get him. He's not available. And I'm telling you, that day they brought, I don't know, 6, 7 narrators to me, and I rejected all of them and kept going back to J.D. Jackson until they gave up on me not being a brat about it, and they gave me J.D. Jackson. And if you listen to a sample of Flow, I think the sample of Grip is Maxine. Maxine is great, but Grip there's something about his voice that is such a perfect match for this character, that he just, to me, completely sets this book off. And so I think if you go to Flow, they have a sample of him, and he sounds so great. But I was a brat about it, and that's how we ended up using him. And I'm so glad that I insisted because he's perfect for it. Do you listen to audios? And if you do, which are your favorite books? I don't listen to a ton. I'm a little ADD. I'm all over the place all the time. And when I'm when I'm reading a book, I need the words in front of me. But I have listened to a few. I enjoyed The Law of Moses, Amy Harmon's books on audio. I don't listen to very many, but I would probably say Law of Moses and Song of David, because I definitely listen to those and really, really like them. I think that's it. That's here. I feel like I've held you guys hostage anyway. If you have questions for me, I guess you could post them and I'll answer them. I am always in my reader group, Kennedy Ryan Books, to answer questions, and I have snippets and all kinds of stuff in there. Be on the lookout for my next book, which is called Still. It is the follow-up to Grip. And I have a free book, which is the prequel for Grip, called Flow. So thank you again, Heather, for having me. You guys are amazing, and it's Friday. Have an awesome weekend.